I can say with confidence, though, at 9 p.m., President Trump's address to the nation, you will definitely hear the president's speech live here on 95.5 WSB. All right, now that we got that out of the way, joining us live in studio, political superstar, political analyst Stephen Lawson in studio. You and I were just talking about the Braves. I'm excited. Pretty decent start. Drake Baldwin's mashing. I can watch the games now thanks to Xfinity and Braves Vision. What I find, do you have Braves Vision? Have you been watching it?
Yeah.
So, like, I'll go to sleep at night with the Braves game on, and I'll wake up in the morning, and there's no other programming. It's just I wake up and it's like the next game is tomorrow. It's like they just have the games on.
They do, and I totally got sucked in because I bought the Braves Vision and MLB TV package bundle. Yeah. You and I both do fantasy baseball. Yeah. It's like I'm all the way in.
Yeah. Do you haven't even because I'm struggling to find time for the show. Do you have time to do
hard.
Political stuff?
It's hard.
It's tough during baseball season. All right, I want to start with new Democratic poll numbers. I don't know the validity of these. I pulled them off Shelley Winter's Facebook page, so I'm just prefacing that. But maybe you've seen it. A poll obtained by NJ Hotline showing the Democratic governor primary. Keisha Lance Bottoms topping the list at 32%, followed by Jason Estevez, former Georgia state senator, at 14%, former lieutenant governor, former Republican Jeff Duncan at 12%, and Michael Thurmond at 11%. Does that vibe, these poll numbers vibe with what you're hearing and seeing?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked for a while, Mark, about the former Atlanta mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, being in the pole position, being the front runner in that race, but there was a separate race for second place. Who was going to emerge from that crowded field? Jason Estevez clearly making a move. I think he's surging. We also saw in the past couple of weeks that Michael Thurmond got a couple big endorsements from Andrew Young and former Democrat Governor Roy Barnes. I think that's a boost for his campaign. And then Jeff Duncan is continuing to raise some money. I do think Estevez is making a surge. I think that there's a lot of momentum right now around his campaign. I think the question is, can he get, or any of these other people get anywhere close to the 30-35% that Keisha Lance Bottoms is getting? And then what does that look like in a runoff where that race is likely headed?
But, the internal polls we saw a month ago, it was possible we wouldn't see a runoff. Like Keisha Lance Bottoms was polling north of 50%. With these latest poll numbers, if they're correct, it looks like runoff's an inevitability at this point.
I think with that many people on the ballot, it is. I think you're going to see that on the Republican side as well, where the math it makes it very, very difficult for even any person, even if they're in a strong front runner position, to hit that 50% plus one threshold.
Are the Dems going to start spending money? Or are they? And I'm just not seeing it.
Well, that's a question, right? And we've talked about this, where you've got Keisha Lance Bottoms in that position, but the question is, with the limited resources that the rest of the field is in, they have to make the decision, do I use the money that I have, do I use the limited resources I have to go after her, to try to bring her back down to earth, or to boost myself? It's a tough spot to be in. I think any candidate that emerges in second place is going to have to play their hand correctly and have to use their dollars wisely coming down the stretch.
Well, if you're Estevez, Duncan, Thurmond, I mean, spend it or lose it, because if you don't finish number two, then you don't get to that primary. So if I would advise him, if you have cash on hand, you got to get to number two at least, or else the game's over.
Yeah, and again, layered on top of that is all of this money that is getting spent on the other side of the aisle in this Burt Jones, Rick Jackson, diminishes and dilutes the potency of their resources. And it makes it even harder for them to break through. That's why I think Keisha Lance Bottoms is clearly in the front runner seat, and it's going to be really tough on that fight for second place on the Democrat side.
On the Republican side, gloves officially are off. I mean, we heard last half hour, Rick Jackson commercial here going after Burt Jones and Chinese vape pens, and that's the second set of spots that I've seen that is criticizing Burt Jones, and I didn't know that he owned land that was used by gas stations. There was one about legalizing gambling in these gas stations. He's getting paid, and the last the commercial we heard last half hour, that's a Rick Jackson ad. Like it's not a PAC. It's like, hey, I'm Rick Jackson. I approve this message. Gloves officially off here.
Yeah, and we talked about on the Democrat side, those candidates having to make that decision. Do I go negative or do I go positive? Rick Jackson doesn't have to make those decisions because of the resources that he has, because of his self-funder status. He's able to go positive and negative. I do think that right now that there is, on the Republican side, there's a little fatigue on the negative ads. I think that there's a desire for a lot of Republican voters to hear messages. Tell me what you believe in, what you're for, what you're fighting for, your background, your record. I think when Rick Jackson has done that in his ads, it's been very effective. I think the lieutenant governor is going to also have to do that coming down the stretch, talking about his record on the income tax, on school choice. He's got a lot of things he can talk about. I think he's going to have to message those positive, proactive things more heavily down the stretch.
Political analyst Stephen Lawson joining us live in studio here on the Mark Arum Show. Saw a TV spot, an endorsement spot for Rick Jackson from Newt Gingrich, who is, historically a historic figure in Republican politics in Georgia. Does he have the same? Does his endorsement have the same impact it might have had 15 or 20 years ago?
Probably not, but I do think it's a boost for Rick Jackson's campaign. Obviously, you've seen a lot of the attacks from Burt Jones' campaign saying, hey, Rick Jackson is not a real conservative. He's a fraud. He's, not, he's a Johnny-come-lately kind of Republican. I think the endorsement from Newt Gingrich helps bolster some of Rick Jackson's bona fides and kind of inoculate him a little bit from some of those attacks. So I do think it was helpful in that respect. And look, there's a lot of voters in our state, particularly older voters, that still hold Newt Gingrich in very high regard. And so I do think that was definitely a boost for the Rick Jackson campaign.
There was one attack ad against Jackson, and I'm sorry because I don't remember if it was an official Burt Jones ad or a PAC ad going after Mr. Jackson's previous campaign donations that don't square up with the far right angle, or at least the very conservative angle that he's taking. Again, I don't know if that. Have you seen that ad? Do you know that I'm talking about? I don't know if that was a Burt Jones ad or a PAC ad, but I mean the fists are flying.
They are.
Is this an inevitability that there will be a runoff as well?
I think so. Yeah, I think on the Republican side, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be Rick Jackson and Burt Jones in a runoff. I think the writing is on the wall on that. I think we've talked about, Mark, on your show, Attorney General Chris Carr and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Attorney General Chris Carr is up with a new public safety ad that I thought it was a positive ad that I thought was really well done. I don't know if public safety, though, is a big vote determinant in Republican primary politics. Obviously, we've talked about the economy and affordability are number one on people's minds. So I think that's the message that people want to hear. I think that's what Burt Jones and Rick Jackson are talking about. And I think those are the two that it will end up in a runoff.
Sign it down!
I'm assuming you're going to be out of pocket tomorrow, not available to be contacted. Signy
on and off. On and off. Yeah, we've got Sine Die coming, obviously, the last day, the General Assembly's legislative session. Lots of things still going on. These last 2 days are really where the rubber meets the road on a lot of legislation. We've got big ticket items. We've got property taxes. We've got income taxes. We've got insurance reform. There's a number of things. The Speaker's priority literacy bill did pass yesterday, which was a huge boost for him. I think that's going to have a generational impact on our young learners in the classroom, and kudos to him for getting that done.
So Capitol reporter Jonathan O'Brien will be joining us tomorrow live on the show for Sine Die. Any excuse I can to just play
Sine Die.
I just love that. So he'll be covering it, but you're there. Piccadilly text line's open. If you hear anything, see anything, feel free to text me and I'll get it right on the air.
Absolutely.